Hello everyone. Thank you for joining me today. We got a couple minutes left here for 11, so I will hold off on starting here for another minute or two, let everybody get settled in, and then we will go ahead and get started. All right, I am showing it's 11 o'clock, so once again, thank everybody for joining me. Today we're going to be talking about ISO 20000, more specifically ISO 20000-1, as that standard contains the requirements for a service management system for an IT service provider. A few quick notes here. All the participants have been muted. There is a question section in your GoToWebinar dashboard. Please feel free at any time to go ahead and ask any questions that you have there. At the end of the session, as time permits, I will try and answer as many questions as I can. Additionally, there'll be copies of today's presentation available for download on our website, pjr.com, under previously recorded webinars. So a quick breakdown of the topics today. Spend a little bit of time talking about who this standard's aimed at, what kinds of organizations could benefit from implementing a service management system based on the requirements in this standard. And we'll also kind of briefly touch on the five main clauses of the standard. You have general requirements, the design and transition of services, the delivery of services, managing relationships and resolving incidents, and controlling changes in deployment of services. I'm sorry, there's 6 there. The first one, general requirements, I did not count. And then after that, as we wrap up, I will go ahead and try and get through as many questions as I can. So who is this standard aimed for? It's written for information technology service providers, and its requirements cover the design, transition, delivery, and improvement of service offerings. It can be used by providers of voice and data services, cloud services, hosted services, help desk services, just as a few examples. The requirements in ISO 20000 Part 1 focus on fulfilling service requirements and providing value for both the customer and service provider. The coordinated implementation and integration of a service management system, which I will just refer to as an SMS. From here on out, please don't get that confused with the text message. Provide control and opportunities for continual improvement, greater effectiveness, and efficiency. So we'll go ahead and jump right into the first section here, general requirements. And if any of you are familiar with other ISO standards, you will see certainly some overlap here in this section. Part of this section focuses on establishing the foundation of the SMS. Its requirements include commitment from top management, establishing the service management policy, assigning responsibilities and authorities. It covers document control requirements, and it also gives a little bit of guidance on defining the scope of the service management system. And I will just say here as a note, the next webinar I give on ISO 20000, either next month or the month after, I'm thinking is going to focus on scoping. there's actually an entire 60-page guidance document that ISO has written just about determining the scope of your service management system and really the applicability of ISO 20000 depending on the nature of your situation. Obviously, when it comes to IT services, there can be fairly complex supply chains with many different moving organizations and parts within it. So, but that'll be for the next webinar. A key part of this section of the standard is the identification of processes carried out by other parties that are part of the service management system. The service provider seeking to be certified or conform with the standard's requirements must demonstrate the ability to control and be accountable for processes or parts of processes operated by other parties. So that's to say, if services you provide to your customer are also reliant on another supplier's services, say internet service provider, there has to be agreements in place between you and these other key suppliers to your services that clearly show you are able to enforce and monitor and stay on them as far as fulfilling your and your customer requirements as you see fit. So there are no permissible exclusions to the requirements in ISO 20000 Part 1. So again, parts of the SMS operated by other parties must still be demonstrated to be controlled and governed by the service provider seeking certification. All right. The next section of the standard talks about the design and transition of services. The intent of these processes is to establish and implement plans and procedures to control the delivery of new or significantly changed services. The requirements for this process includes formal planning of the new or changed service, including assigning authority and responsibilities for design, development, and transition activities, identification of resources needed, timescale for planned activities, service acceptance criteria, and expected outcomes from the new or changed service. So really, when you're talking about a significant change to a service or a brand new service offering, the standard's going to require that a good amount of planning and design work take place. There should be no reactionary or ad hoc feeling to making these kinds of changes just based on a customer request. The idea here is that the change is significant enough that it needs to have lots of eyes on it. It needs to be well thought out. It needs to be assessed for risks, to the new service or to other services that it may or may not affect. A formal design procedure is to be used to document the characteristics of the service and to record changes to other services, SLAs or service level agreements, resources needed, procedures, etc. within the service management system. The service provider must ensure the design enables the new or changed service to meet the service requirements, and the new or changed service must be developed in accordance with this documented design. The transition activities include testing of the new or changed service against the documented design and service requirements, including service acceptance criteria. The results of the transition activities shall be used by the service provider and interested parties to determine if it is ready to deploy. So here, after you go through the formal design period and you actually go ahead and develop the new or changed service, it needs to be formally and rigorously tested against service acceptance criteria that have been established. And based on those results, it needs to get analyzed by appropriate leadership, and a determination needs to be made on whether or not they're going to move forward with deploying the service, or if it needs some further time in development, or if it is just not going to fit with the service provider's offerings. This process and the change management process that is part of the control processes, which is another main section of this standard, can create a little confusion on when it's appropriate to use which process. But basically the intent is for this process to be used when the changes proposed have the potential to have a major impact on services and customers and require that increased level of visibility and control to manage the higher risks associated with them. The change management policy that's required to be written also must include the criteria used to determine if a change may have a major impact on services or the customer, and therefore use this process instead of the change management process. So basically what that's saying is when we get into the control processes, there is a change process, and part of it requires a policy to be written. And within that policy, it's going to be up to the service provider to determine, what are the criteria and factors that are going to be looked at when assessing whether or not a change request, say from a customer, can go ahead and be handled through that change process, which does not require the formal design and the level of rigor and planning that a service offering that would have to go through this process would require. So that should help clear up any confusion, because you yourself as a service provider have to decide what constitutes a major change and what constitutes a not major change. The next section of the standard focuses on the actual delivery of the service offerings. It includes requirements which address the delivery of services offered by the provider. Some key points include service level management. So this basically speaks to establishing and agreeing on the services to be delivered with the customer, including service level agreements. So yeah, I'm sure most of you are familiar, but service level agreements are going to talk about expected, say, for an internet service provider, it's going to talk about expected uptime. Typically, it's going to be given in 4 or 5 decimal places of 9 nines. And basically, if that's violated, there'll be some recourse available to the customer, whether it be in reimbursement of money spent on the service or otherwise. But this part of the standard, it requires that these are clearly defined and agreed upon at the time that the contract is entered into. Another key part of this section is the reporting. It talks about reports concerning service performance against service targets, reporting significant incidents, customer satisfaction measurements and complaints, and other information shall be produced, and their purpose, audience, and frequency shall be agreed upon by the service provider and interested parties. So again, the standard is going to require here that what reports are going to be made available and at what frequency is all agreed upon ahead of time. So there should be no surprises, and it should be a very regular part of the service offering is making this this data and these reports available to customers as agreed upon. Another part of this section talks about service continuity and availability. Service providers are required to address risks to the availability of services provided, and service continuity and availability requirements will again be agreed upon between the service provider, customer, and interested parties. The availability requirements must include access rights to the services, service response time, and end-to-end availability of services. The provider must also maintain service continuity plans as well as test them against the agreed upon service requirements, continuity requirements. So basically, as applicable to the services offered, there has to be continuity plans in place that address service level agreements and uptime requirements of the contracts entered into with the customers. And these plans actually have to be tested to make sure that in the event of a facilities outage or any number of other incidents, these critical services are still going to be available to the customers. And then the budgeting and accounting for services. So this section talks about the policies and procedures that are required for budgeting and accounting for service components, including apportioning indirect costs and allocating direct costs to services to provide a total cost for services in order to enable effective financial control and decision making. So here, because it's not necessarily as clear as say maybe it would be for a manufacturer of a simple good, where you can look at your raw materials, your labor, your infrastructure costs, and you can pretty easily get an idea of what the total cost is to produce a given component. With services, there's going to be a lot of shared infrastructure, you know, things that aren't necessarily as easy to enumerate as far as being able to assign costs. So this section, it requires service providers to make sure that they have an effective way to have a good understanding of what the cost is to them to provide these services, in order that they so that they can make sure that they are pricing them appropriately and making it beneficial to them. The next key part of this section talks about capacity management. Service providers shall identify and agree upon capacity and performance requirements of services with their customers. Additionally, a capacity plan will be maintained and must consider human, technical, information, and financial resources. Capacity shall be monitored, and sufficient capacity must be provided to fulfill agreed upon performance and capacity requirements. Again, taking the example of an internet service provider, you know, it's going to be incumbent upon them to not only ensure that they have enough capacity for their current customer base, but to forecast growth or possibly additional requirements of existing customers, and ensure that you know, they have a buffer there so that they can increase capacity without having a negative effect on the services offered. And then lastly, in this section, it does talk about information security. If any of you are familiar with ISO 27001, that's another standard that I actually audit for and am quite involved with. And it's all about information security. Now, this standard, there's about 3 or 4 paragraphs that talk about information security, so it's not nearly to that level of rigor, but it definitely does require that information security risk assessments and treatments be done, basically identifying any information security related risks and then putting controls, whether they be technical, administrative, whatever the case may be, in place in order to mitigate those risks down to an acceptable level. It also requires that information security audits internally are done on a regular basis, and it also requires that as part of developing or making changes to services, information security risks are considered. All right. The next major section of the standard talks about the relationship processes. This section gives requirements for service providers regarding communication with customers as well as suppliers. The first part of this section, business relationships, requires that each customer will have a designated individual who is responsible for managing the customer relationship and customer satisfaction. So in each customer's case, there's going to be a single throat to choke, if you will, on the service provider side, someone who's responsible for managing that relationship, ensuring that the customer is happy with the performance of the services and resolving any issues with customer satisfaction. They don't have to be the only ones who ever deal with them. You know, they could be in charge of a department, whatever the case may be, but there does need to be a named specified individual who is responsible for it. Additionally, the service provider will establish the channels to be used to facilitate the communication with the customer, including service complaints. And the performance of the services provided shall be reviewed with the customer at planned intervals. Again, that kind of goes hand in hand with the reporting, but you know, this again, it's a formal, it's planned ahead of time. It's a known quantity that you know, these reviews will take place. And customer satisfaction shall be measured and reviewed at planned intervals as well, which I feel the two of those go hand in hand. Typically, service performance is going to be a big driver of customer satisfaction when it comes to service providers. Supplier management, so the other part of this section, service providers shall have a designated individual who is responsible for managing the relationship for each supplier. Again, there'll be single throat to choke or a single point person to go to for each supplier to the service management system. There shall also be contracts in place with each supplier that is part of the SMS, and these contracts must address requirements to be fulfilled by the supplier, service targets, reporting and communication to be provided by the supplier, amongst others. This goes back to ensuring that the service provider seeking certification can demonstrate its ability to have governance and control over the suppliers, or third parties that are relevant to the services they offer. Supplier performance must also be monitored and measured against service targets and other contractual obligations. So again, there has to be a level of formalized, mature control in place for these suppliers. It's not acceptable for a service provider to just say, it was an upstream provider's issue, and kind of wash their hands of any incidents that occurred as a result. There needs to be processes in place there to ensure that the suppliers are holding up their end of the bargain as well and meeting your requirements. The next main section of the standard talks about the resolution processes. So in this section, the requirements for incident and service request management as well as problem management are defined. The first part, incident and service request management, the standard requires a documented procedure for managing incidents as well as for managing service requests. In both cases, the procedures need to ensure consistent recording of incidents or service requests. They need to be prioritized and classified. The necessary activities to resolve the incident or service request must be identified, as well as actions needed to update and close out the incident or service request. And as required, escalation to ensure resolution of the incident or service request. So, just drawing from my past experience working at a service provider, this goes kind of to having some kind of ticketing system or tracking system where you're going to be able to, capture all the pertinent details at the time these service requests or incidents occur and are reported. And this is kind of going to be the mechanism used throughout the lifetime of the service request or incident to track notes, activities, actions taken, when needed, escalation to either higher tiers of support or engineering or wherever it needs to go. But this all needs to be tracked and archived for a couple reasons that we'll get into here going forward into the control processes. The other part of this section is problem management. Again, the standard requires a documented procedure for identifying and mitigating or avoiding the impact of incidents and problems. The procedure includes similar requirements to that of the incident and service request procedures, including consistent recording, prioritization and classification, etc. The key point in this process is that it is to be used to identify the unknown underlying root causes of incidents and propose permanent resolutions. So, and at least for me, it was a little ambiguous when I saw the incident process and the problem process, but as I understand it now that I did some further research, it's basically after an incident goes through the resolution or gets resolved through the incident process, those details would then find their way to the group that's in charge of the problem management process, and they're going to go ahead and take a real deep dive, do a root cause analysis. What exactly happened here? How did this happen? Look for potential opportunities for it to occur again with other customers or other services. They're going to take a real deep look to try and make sure that the information they've gathered in resolving this incident can be used to ensure that it doesn't happen anywhere else, or that information could be used somehow to prevent maybe something along the lines of the incident that did occur from happening in the future. Basically, it just wants to make sure that the information that's getting captured and the good work that's potentially being done by technicians as they work these incidents to resolution isn't just kind of hanging out, unseen and unused by the organization while the same incident keeps occurring either with other customers or other services. You know, it really wants to leverage any lessons learned or solutions found as a result of the incident management process to be able to proactively use those to prevent further occurrences of similar incidents. All right, the control processes. So the processes in this section of the standard are intended to manage and control the service assets and configurations, as well as their relationships. Fulfillment of the requirements in this section will help ensure consistency and stability of the services offered. So the first part of this section talks about configuration management. The standard requires that all configuration items, or CIs, must have a documented definition. The definition must describe the configuration item, the relationships between itself and other CIs or service components, its status, its version, its location, any associated requests for change or incidents, problems, known errors. All this must be recorded in a configuration management database and be maintained and updated as needed. By fulfilling these requirements, service providers can avoid incidents by being alerted to known issues or previous incidents that occurred with the same configuration items on other service instances. So basically this configuration management database we're talking about here is kind of the bridge between a lot of the different processes in the standard, but for instance, in the example we were just talking about, the incident resolution process and the problem management process, a lot of the information and details that folks doing the root cause analysis would want and need to see need to be captured and tracked within this configuration management database. And obviously, you know, having it in electronic format, say for instance, would be a real good way for potential issues to be prevented before they happen. You know, if you have an ordering system and a given customer's ordered a service, and let's say it uses a specific router and across a certain service delivery medium that, you know, with this version of firmware on the router, there was a known issue, it locks up, etc., whatever the case. Well, that could be flagged right away in the order system. This is a known error, you know, here's what needs to be done to resolve it, and there you go. So that's just one example. Another key part of this section of the standard is the change management process. It states that service providers shall establish a change management policy which defines CIs under control of change management and criteria used to determine changes that may have a major impact to the service or customer. Again, this goes back to the design and transition of new services, new or changed services process. So this is the part right here when you're writing this policy where you're going to kind of clearly define the criteria that's going to make the determination whether a given change can go through this change management process, which isn't as rigorous and does not require the same level of design work to be done ahead of time, or if it needs to go over to the design and transition of new or changed services process, which obviously is that more rigorous set of processes and procedures that we discussed earlier on. It's required that all requests for changes be recorded and classified again, and that the service provider shall decide on accepting requests for changes after considering the risks, potential impacts, service requirements, feasibility, and financial impacts. Approved changes will be developed and tested, and a schedule for deploying them shall be established and communicated. You know, as I read through this, again, I go back to my previous life working for a service provider, and there's so many occasions I can remember where, you know, good intentions by a technician to satisfy a customer request led to, you know, a litany of these one-off builds and configurations that basically would become completely unsupportable if that technician was no longer available, or if too much time had passed since they last looked at it. As you can imagine, you know, it's very frustrating for the customer to have to hear that the service provider is not sure how their service is configured. They've never seen it before, and they're going to have to do some more research to try and figure out what's going on. So having some controls in place, like what's described here, can go a long way to just standardizing the service offerings, making them a lot more stable, making them a lot more serviceable, and just making them a lot more consistent. All right, the next part of this section is release and deployment management. Here the standard defines requirements for planning and deploying newer change services and service components. It requires the planning to be coordinated with the change management process for applicable information regarding requests for change, as well as known errors and problems. These releases must be built and tested prior to deployment in a controlled test environment, and acceptance criteria must be agreed upon with the customer and interested parties. The release shall be verified against the agreed upon acceptance criteria as well. Where possible, the activities or actions required to reverse or revert an unsuccessful deployment shall be planned and tested, and then obviously used in the event of an unsuccessful deployment into the live environment. The release will be monitored after deployment to determine its success or failure, and this information shall be recorded and analyzed to identify opportunities for improvement. So basically, this is saying before we do something new, before we do something we haven't done before, we're going to test it. We're also going to clearly identify what the acceptance criteria is. You know, not just does it feel better, but the actual performance or other characteristics of the service that were the desired effect need to be tested against. And then after it's released, it's going to be watched and analyzed to ensure that it is in fact achieving its intended outcome, and that information will be used, you know, or can be used further down the road if there's similar change requests or there were lessons learned from an unsuccessful deployment in order to avoid repeating the same mistakes. All right. I guess that's the end. I apologize. I have a tendency to speak a little fast during these things. All right. Let me go ahead and get to the questions here. All right. Farhat wants to know that certificate, how can we have? All right, Farhat, so looks like there might be a little bit of a language barrier here, but it sounds like you are asking how to become certified. So what you can do, you can reach out to us. I have our contact information on the screen right here. We do offer certification services against ISO 20000, and we have project managers that you can be put in touch with, and they can give you all the information you need on what you have to do to get the ball rolling. And basically it's going to be similar to other certifications, ISO certifications. There's going to be an initial certification audit, and then there'll be annual or semi-annual surveillance audits just to ensure that all the requirements of the standard are continuing to be met on an ongoing basis. I hope that helps. Let's see what else we have here. Oh, thank you, Wahid. Happy that you joined, and I hope it was informational for you. I know this standard is just starting to gain a little bit more traction and get a little bit more visibility. So it's something that we definitely wanted to try and shine some more light on and provide some more information. As I stated, there'll be more of these webinars on ISO 20000 coming in the next few months. There's also going to be a video I think we're going to put out on our website that's going to contain some additional information about the standard and becoming certified. Hi, Mary. that is a great question. Mary here asked when the updated version of the standard is going to be published, and I have to say at this time I do not know. ISO, with all their standards, has a very convoluted process. I'm sure it's effective, but there's a ton of stages that these drafts have to go through and be approved. And in my experience, it seems that we find out when they find out, which and many times is not the original dates and timelines they set out. All right, we have a question here from John. Will the charts be available after the presentation? Yes, John. It should be later today, but I believe absolutely by the end of the week. The presentation itself will be available for download, a recording of the webinar, and I'm not sure if they make the actual PowerPoint presentation available for download, but obviously the recording, you'd be able to jog through at your own leisure to review all the slides as you would like. Oh, Mary, you're welcome, and John, you are also welcome. Thank you both for joining. And again, if anyone has any further questions and maybe they're not comfortable asking them through this medium, feel free to reach out to us. Our number here is 800-800-7910, or shoot me personally an email. My email address is on the screen right now, and it is jlaffey@pjr.com. I would be happy to answer any questions to the best of my ability, and I'd be happy to do that. All right, we have a question here from Phil. What are the main elements in developing the cost for certification? Phil, the main driver is going to be the size of the organization and the number of service personnel within the scope of the management system. So the employee count is going to have a big driver or be a big factor in the total cost. Additionally, other factors would include, complexity of the services offered or the number of the services offered, as well as the logistics of the organization. If it's an organization that operates several offices in several different regions of the world and different time zones, obviously that can affect the price as well. On the flip side of that, if you're a company who's kind of looking into possibly becoming certified to the standard and you're already certified to another ISO standard like 9001 or 27001, that would actually allow us to take some reductions in the amount of time just to account for the commonalities that can be found between this and other ISO standards, as well as the expected familiarity with an organization and the requirements of ISO standards. Typically, it's a bit of a learning curve the first time you get certified to an ISO standard, and as you move forward from that, a lot of those lessons learned remove a lot of the burden on the initial audit, just because everybody kind of knows what's expected and what's required. I hope that answers your question, Phil. Thank you for the attendance, and I appreciate the question. All right, guys, I'll hang out here for a couple more minutes, see if there's any more questions, comments, suggestions. I welcome any feedback. I'm always looking to improve, so I certainly appreciate it. Mary here had another question. It looked like, is there any guideline or guidance documents? and then she actually referenced 20,000 Part 2, and that is absolutely where I would point. Mary, ISO 20,000 Part 2 is a guidance document, and it goes into greater detail in each section of the standard, provides, you know, a little bit more concrete examples, intentions of this clause and that clause, and I think it's a great resource, absolutely, if you're looking to implement a service management system based on the requirements in 20,000 Part 1. It definitely does a good job of answering a lot of questions that I had, and I think anybody would have based on the first time they read through the standard. Maria here is asking if there's any specific courses to train auditors. Maria, yes, I know that there are training organizations out there who do offer. I've seen a number of different courses related to ISO 20,000, everything from foundation courses to implementation courses to auditor courses, lead auditor courses. It's similar to what you'll see with a lot of the other standards. So yes, they are out there. I don't specifically know who all is offering them. We currently are not at this time at Perry Johnson, but it certainly would be something we'd be interested in offering if we see a potential want there for it. On a related note, we are going to be offering a ISO 27001. Again, that's the standard I referenced earlier, that is all things information security. We will be offering a lead auditor course for ISO 27001. Right now we're looking at the end of May, early June for our first course offering, and we're going to be publishing that information on our website in the coming days here. So if there's any interest there, please, I would encourage you to check that out, and we'd love to have you. And Mary and Maria, you are both quite welcome. All right, guys, well, if there's no more questions, I just want to thank everybody again for attending. And again, please reach out to us with any further questions, or if you are interested in becoming certified, or maybe not sure if you're interested in becoming certified, but might be. Please reach out to us. We'll be able to help you with any questions you have, and hopefully be able to get you set up for registration. I think there's a lot of benefits for service providers in implementing the management system specified in this standard, and it obviously can provide a business benefit too, being able to demonstrate to your employees or to your customers and potential customers just the level of maturity that your system has. So with that, thank you all very much. Have a great day.